Hello, everyone. My name is Ramesh Separad, and I am advisory board member of Organization of Iranian American Communities, OIAC. It is a great pleasure to inaugurate our virtual nationwide conference of the Iranian American Communities, really our convention, as we gather here to call for regime change in Iran by the Iranian people. Today marks the second anniversary of maximum pressure campaign launched by the United States, and the Iranian people welcome this move because it weakens the IRGC and the regime. People of Iran are indeed the longest suffering victims of the mullah's regime. We gather today to urge the administration to keep up with the pressure and trigger the snapback of the UN Security Council resolution on Iran. Just yesterday, the United States sanctions Iran's Minister of Interior and several others under the human rights related authorities. The people of Iran welcome this news and urge the US to continue such efforts because mullahs are responsible for executions, torture, imprisonments, the 1988 massacre as noted by Amnesty International, wars and terrorism. Corruption, mafia-style governance, terrorism, and chaos is what explains the history of this regime over the past 40 years. Yet, there is a vibrant resistance movement for change and a free Iran. The proud people of Iran are ready to take back the country and change this regime. Our speakers today will discuss the global threat of the regime, domestic repression, and the prospect of change. They will also discuss the US policy, particularly the need to stand on the side of the people of Iran and specific steps to enact snapback mechanisms at the UN Security Council to impose all UN Security Council sanctions on the regime in Iran. On behalf of OIAC, our sponsoring organization, and all of our local communities across 40 states, I welcome all of you. Whether we are in person or virtual, we are as eager as ever and proud to continue our effort for a free Iran, and that day is very soon. We have a very impressive lineup of our speakers, including representatives and leaders of Iranian American communities. A very special welcome to our distinguished guests, Ms. Sona Samsami from the National Council of Resistance of Iran, Washington, D.C. office, Governor Tom Ridge, America's first Secretary of Homeland Security and former Governor of Pennsylvania, Senator Robert Torricelli, former U.S. Senate from New Jersey, and Ambassador Kenneth Blackwell, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, who will be joining us shortly. We also have Bishop Dr. Robert Stearns and also Reverend Dr. Marcus Miranda. We're very, very pleased to welcome all of you. I also want to welcome all of the media outlets and the journalists who have joined us for our event today. This event is being broadcasted and live streamed into Iran and Europe. And I also want to especially thank one of the outlets who's streaming this program right now that has about 250,000 viewers. We welcome each and every one of you. Our event and social media hashtag is #FreeIran. OIAC 2020 virtual conference. With that, let's start with our first speaker from the Iranian American community. We will start with Iranian American community of Maryland. Please go ahead.
Hello. My name is Aref Alvandi. It is an honor to be with you all today. On behalf of the Iranian American Community of Maryland, I welcome you to this event. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and supporters of the free Iran, our message is very clear. We stand with the millions of Iranians protesting against the regime of mullahs as they shout, "Down with Khamenei, down with Rouhani." Over the last several months, we have witnessed two major nationwide uprisings. People from all walks of life, blue collar, white collar, participate in these protests. It is the women, the students, the youth, the labor movement, the teachers union, the workers, the unemployed and underemployed that are partaking in these protests and uprising. The days of this regime are numbered, and nobody knows that better and understands that better than this regime of the mullahs. It is for this very reason we call upon our policymakers and government officials to continue to stand with the people of Iran and keep the maximum pressure on this regime. The people of Iran are paying the ultimate price for their freedom, with their lives. And their bravery fighting this brutal regime is nothing short of heroism. More than 1,500 people have been massacred during the 2019 November uprising, and thousands more arrested who face torture every day. We cannot and should not allow a repressive regime of Iran to gain access to military armament in the international market. And we urge the UN Secretary Council members to join the United States in blocking arms sales to Mullah's regime. Let me emphasize, the best option is for the US to activate the snapback mechanism so that the Ayatollahs would get no relief from the international community to buy arms, develop nuclear weapons, and empower their proxies in the region and massacre people. We know what it takes to bring democracy in Iran. And we ask for the world to recognize the rights of the Iranian people to end this terrorist regime of mullahs. And I thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Afsaneh Maksudi. I join you as a member of Iranian American community of Michigan. As a physician who has seen firsthand what COVID-19 has done to many communities, today I want to discuss how Iran is uniquely different than other countries. In Iran, doctors and nurses face arrest and death if they expose the true infection rate and deaths. The world community and policymakers must understand how the regime deception and disinformation campaigns during this pandemic cannot be analyzed in a vacuum. Mullah's domestic repression, terrorism, and nuclear expansion has a new tool, and that is COVID-19. Zarif is using it to lobby and get sympathy for his dying regime. Rouhani is using it to distract the public on his utter failure. Khamenei is using it as a strategy to give his regime a lifeline. Revolutionary guards are using it for repression. Yet, the people of Iran continue to denounce all of them. Any sanctions relief for the regime under the cover of helping the victims of the pandemic is a lie by regime and its lobbyists. Medical assistance or medicine should go directly to the people of Iran and not to the regime. The rejection of the regime must be recognized with the effort of resistance units, health workers risking lives to inform the global community about COVID-19. People are coming together locally and nationally to help each other. This is the first of true Iran, the face of resistance, and let us celebrate them and declare our solidarity with the people of Iran. Thank you, and keep healthy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nader Ehsani. I'm a dentist practicing in Kentucky. It is my pleasure to speak with you on behalf of the Iranian American community in Kentucky. We are witnessing a history in making in Iran, where rebellion in the street is now happening in prisons. Political prisoners who, despite the torture, threat of execution, and constant harassment of their families, have joined the protest. In the last few months, we have seen rejection of the regime is the wave of prison rebellions and escape in more than 10 cities. The public is rushing to aid those who have escaped and given them refuge. The wave of rebellions have continued. As last week, the city of Urumiyeh witnessed another prison rebellion. This is an indication of regime's weakness, where prisoners are taking matters in their own hands. The sign of a crumbling regime is now becoming more evident. We all are so moved by the message of resistance that is coming from the political prisoners as they urge all of us to be their voice to ensure our journey to a free Iran is not distracted by the regime's propaganda and plots. We stand with them and salute their bravery. Join us in this call for solidarity and press for the release of all political prisoners. Thank you very much. Stay healthy and be safe.
Hello everyone, my name is Hasi Hassami. I'm a medical dosimetrist at the University of Texas. My warmest greetings to you all who took time from your busy day to attend this meeting. I'm very happy to join you today on behalf of the Iranian American community of Texas. My message today is for student movement. Brave students who carried legacy of student protest and played a historic role during and after 1979 revolution. Iranian students have been on front line of anti-Shah protests and not against the mullahs. The founders of Iran's main opposition group, Mujahedin Khalq, emerged from vibrant culture of student movement, and the organization continues to carry the torch today. 3 major universities with highest academic credentials, namely Sharif, Tehran, and Amir Kabir universities, have been in front of student movements from the time of the Shah until today. No wonder elite students Ali Younesi and Amir Hussein Moradi were arrested from Sharif University of Technology, were arrested last month, were accused of having ties with the main Iranian opposition group, MEK. There is an enduring and impactful legacy of student movement through multiple generations of Iranian history. There is the movements, as we could see in the recent uprisings that happened January of this year. Students were shouting, "Down with the tyrants, be it the Shah or the supreme leader, neither the crown nor the turban, and the mullahs are goners." We can clearly see the message that learned from the previous dictatorship has carried to today's movement. As I join you here today to call for the release of these 2 bright students, among with 18 others who have been arrested with the similar charges, I'm honored to stand with them and carry their message here in the United States, where we fight for free Iran. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the speakers as well as everyone who has come out to this event in these difficult times. I would like to play a song called Gula Goldun to convey a sense of hope and support to the student activists in Iran, many of which have been arrested recently.
what a beautiful piece by Sina Saeidian from UC Berkeley, member of OIAC Millennial Chapter. Thank you so much, Sina. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I would like to get a view of our participant because as you know, we are connected from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. I want to say hello to all of our participants. You're on the camera now. Wave or hold your hands up in victory. We are so happy to have all of you with us. I'm seeing folks from California, from Oregon, from Washington State, Arizona, and I also see Texas, Kansas, Colorado. It's just far too many for me to list here. I see Kansas here, I see Missouri. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Let me also turn to our East Coast. Let's go to East Coast and look at our friends from the East Coast who have joined us. From Virginia, do we have the East Coast view? Excellent. I see folks from Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., New York, Pennsylvania. Wave, you're on camera, everybody. I see Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, North Carolina. My colleagues are telling me South Carolina is online. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us today. We're so thankful to be able to do this virtual conference and as we work together for a free Iran. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. At this point, I would like to return back to our speakers and we will turn to our speakers in California.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Omitwar. My greeting to all of you. I'm here to represent the Iranian American community in Southern California. Over the years, we have witnessed how the regime has spread its terrorism and chaos in the whole region through its proxy forces and founding of terrorist groups like the Hezbollah and the others. The regime proceeds to control in the region its politics and hegemony in the whole Middle East. Thankfully, given the maximum pressure, sanctions, and elimination of the terror master like Qasem Soleimani, Iran's supreme leader is no longer be able to be as effective in Iraq, Syria, and the entire region. People of the Iraq, people of the Syria have paid a very heavy price for destructive policies of the regime. This is the way we see such as a strong solidarity being formed among these nations with the Iranian people, and they called for the end of the regime. A peaceful Middle East is only possible when there is a free Iran. I repeat, the peaceful Middle East is only possible when the Iran is free. I speak on behalf of all communities across the United States that we fully support the US's effort to prevent the lifting of arms embargo in October. Thank you very much. God bless and stay safe.
Hello to you and all of our viewers. I hope you are healthy and safe wherever you are. My name is Saeed Sajjadi and I'm a physician. On behalf of Iranian American community in Kansas, it's an honor to speak to you today about US policy on Iran. Now, let's review some facts. Mullah's regime is a terrorist medieval theocracy. It has committed enormous crimes against humanity. It's suffering from the crisis of legitimacy, and therefore it's not able to reform. Hypothetically, if regime were to reform, it would no longer be able to keep its apparatus of repression together and would fall apart with the first wave of people's uprising. Regime's insistence to continue with repression, terrorism, and expansionism is exactly due to its weakness rather than its strength. As a direct result of regime's inherent weakness, JCPOA failed to foster any change in regime's behavior. That's why US had to exit JCPOA to confront the threats of Mullah's regime head on. Indeed, US departure from JCPOA, resulting in the policy of maximum pressure, has been the most realistic US policy toward Mullah's regime in the past 4 decades. This policy allows people of Iran to fight the regime on a level playing field to free Iran. Snapback is the logical progression of policy of maximum pressure in order to contain number one state sponsor of terrorism. This policy allows people of Iran to fight the regime on a level playing field. Snapback is the logical progression of the policy of maximum pressure. US as an original JCPOA participant, as defined by United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231, is legally able to trigger snapback mechanism and renew sanctions from the previous resolutions. US indeed needs to lead and snap back. Others need to follow or get out of the way. Thank you all. See you soon in a free Iran.
Hello, everyone. My name is Batul Zamani, and I'm a real estate broker in Atlanta, Georgia. I speak to you on behalf of Iranian American community of Georgia. You have heard from all other speakers about the Free Iran. The movement for the Free Iran is no different than what we have learned from other liberal democracies around the world. Let me share with you what a Free Iran will look like based on the 10-point plan of Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. She symbolized everything our people have always wanted. Her 10-point plan is visionary, forward-looking, progressive, and in line with the spirit of 100 years of Iranian struggles for freedom and justice. It addressed issues such as separation of church and state, free and fair elections, multi-party system, end of death penalty, gender equality, rule of law, commitment to Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and all other UN treaties. Free market economy, peaceful coexistence, regional cooperation, and non-nuclear Iran. These are all pillars of the Free Iran, and we call upon all US leaders and policymakers to stand with us for Free Iran. Thank you, and God bless, and stay safe.
Hello, my name is Farideh Sediqi. I am a technologist, and I would like to send my greetings to every one of you. I am proud to represent the voice of Iranian American community in Northern California. As you have heard throughout the event today, Iranian movement for change is being carried by a network of resistance units. These units have expanded significantly over the last few years, where you see coordinated acts of protests, slogans, and activities like posting the banners and photos of the Iranian resistance leaders Maryam Rajavi and Masoud Rajavi. It's through their efforts that we can have a clear picture of the alternative to the regime in power. Resistance units represent the depth of the Iranians calling for change. A call that's authentic, homegrown, has a history of resistance, and is willing to pay the price for a free Iran. It's this call that clarifies who the real alternative to this regime is. All those who pose themselves as alternatives, but actually want to take us back to dictatorship of the past, are rejected by the people of Iran. The only alternative that stands out and resonates with the call for change in Iran is the alternative that has exceptional organizational capability, decades of resistance on its record, has sacrificed thousands of its members to fight with this regime. It's hurting the regime on a daily basis, is the #1 concern of the regime, has the ability to organize protests in Iran, has exposed nuclear and missile program and terror network of the regime, is the #1 target of repression and terrorism of Iranian regime, has a well-defined platform for the future of Iran, and has a capable leader that's relying only on the people of Iran to free Iran. And that's none other than the National Council of Resistance of Iran and its pivotal member organization, the MEK. With that, I want to thank you and stay safe.
The spread of coronavirus in Iran, who is to be blamed, the regime or the US sanctions? Iran's regime is mercilessly playing with the Iranian people's lives with its inaction, cover-ups, and politicizing the issue to push for lifting the sanctions. All the resources of the country are in the hands of the Supreme Leader and the IRGC and are not used for fighting COVID-19. Instead, the regime and its apologists push the propaganda that US sanctions are hindering the fight against the pandemic. Ali Khamenei suggested that the virus was a US biological weapon. The following day, the regime's chief propagandist, Foreign Minister Zarif, tweeted that US sanctions were illegal and impeding the global fight against the coronavirus. Some questions if the regime or the sanctions are hindering the fight against the pandemic. Lying for 3 weeks after the spread of coronavirus in Iran for holding the sham parliamentary elections was because of the sanctions. Refusing to quarantine the epicenter, Qom, was due to the sanctions. The IRGC airline Mohaner continued its flights to China. Was it because of the sanctions? If the regime lacks money for the people, why they provided $200 million for the IRGC Quds Force in January? Why in July 2019, $1 billion for medical supplies disappeared and another $170 million allocated for medical goods were instead spent on tobacco? While the Supreme Leader runs a hedge fund worth tens of billions of dollars, why doesn't he use it for healthcare system? If Iran is suffering from sanctions, why the regime refused US humanitarian assistance? Why it prevented Doctors Without Borders from constructing a hospital in Iran? The answer to all these questions, simple. The regime is callously using the citizens' suffering to achieve its political goal. Internationally supervised foreign medical aid and assistance to Iran undercuts the regime's argument that sanctions are the main obstacle to fighting COVID-19.
Ladies and gentlemen, the video pretty much captured what the Iranian regime has done, nothing but crimes against the people of Iran. At this point, I would like to invite you to listen to a journey of a family, 3 generations, members of Iranian American community of Virginia who are here today with us. I'd like to welcome Joanne McIntosh, Hannane Amanpour, and Alia Amanpour Trapp.
Hi everyone, my name is Joanne McIntosh, and I was asked to speak today because although I'm an American, I was living in Iran during the 1979 revolution, and I witnessed firsthand how the people of Iran rose up against the Shah, demanding freedom. But Khomeini hijacked their revolution, their genuine call for democracy. My daughter Zahra was born just a few days after the American embassy was seized, and I witnessed the reign of terror launched by the mullahs against pro-democracy and progressive organizations. I became acquainted with the MEK in those early years, and 4 decades later, the resilience and integrity of the MEK resistance still gives me hope for the future of Iran. When the mullahs crackdown became vicious in 1981, I escaped Iran with my 2 little girls through the mountains into Turkey and back to the US. My youngest daughter, Hannane, was born here in the States. She is here today along with her daughter, Alia, the 3rd generation of our family, advocating a free and democratic Iran. Hannah?
Hello, everyone. I am so honored to be here today and to have an opportunity to speak with you all and share my story. My father was born in Iran and raised and educated in America, but he met my mother. He was a loving and caring man, and I think most people remember him for his kindness and strong sense of faith. And it was these very same characteristics that attracted him to the Iranian Resistance movement. He was researching a book on the memoirs of a political prisoner whom he was to meet along the Iranian frontier when he disappeared in 1988. At first, we'd hoped he'd been captured alive, but after news came out that Khomeini had ordered the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners, we knew he could not have survived. I was 5 when my father died. I honor his memory and his sacrifice for freedom and democracy in Iran. I would like to one day visit the beautiful country of my father, a nation with great culture, magnificent people, and a significant role to play in making the world a safer place. I hope my daughter Alia will join me on that day.
Hello and thank you. This is my first time I'm speaking before all of you. I've never met my grandfather, but he has always been a part of who I am, and his life and death have shaped how I see the world. I am inspired by the youth in Iran, who are risking their lives to carry on the message of the resistance and my grandfather. It is hard for me to grasp how the regime massacred at least 50 teenagers during the November 2019 uprising, some of them as young as 14 years old. This movement is my heritage, and that's why I stand with the people of Iran and their call for democracy. I want to see a free Iran. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be a part of this historic online summit by Iranian Americans. My name is Dr. Solmaz Abu Ali, and I'm an author, a professor, and a world champion in traditional karate. My message today is this: I believe that maximum pressure on the Iranian regime is necessary in order to prevent it from obtaining more arms and resources, which are used to fund its proxies and to kill my fellow Iranians. Now, lately, we've been hearing a lot about how sanctions are to blame for as Iran deals with the coronavirus pandemic. But the truth is, for the most part, this is based on a smokescreen analysis that leaves out what Iranians have been saying all along, voicing chants like, our enemy is here, it's a lie, don't lie, it's the US, and Khamenei is a murderer. In my research and experience, I've yet to come across a single Iranian who blames the maximum pressure policy enforced by the US on Iran for the troubles and sufferings that they've experienced at home. So the fact is and remains that this regime in Iran is anti-Iran, anti-prosperity, anti-human rights, anti-peace, anti-stability. To believe anything else is simply delusional and irresponsible. Now, in covering Iran, I would advise 2 points for the mainstream media. First, remember that for years, Iran has tried to place blame for its own crimes on the people of Iran. And second, look to the messages coming directly from Iran, the message of change, the message of resistance, the message of a free Iran, which all indicators show that it's ripe to become a reality soon. These messages are coming from the brave women's movement, the young girls and women who pour into the streets in every protest and rally as they shout down with the dictators. Let me also take a moment here to voice my support for my native land, for the students, for the women, for the resistance units, for the popular councils. We are with you and we commit to this path of a free Iran. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abu Ali. I also want to talk a little bit about the video we just saw and the speakers who shared with us their personal experience of 3 generations. You know, there is many of these folks among the Iranian community. At this point, I am told by my colleagues that we have more than 1,000 participants joining us on this conference. I want to ask one more time to give us a view from the West all the way to the East Coast. Give us a view of our Iranian American community members from the West Coast. You are on camera. Thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate all your support and continued effort for the free Iran. Let's move to the East Coast if we can. I see Connecticut on the call. Hello, Connecticut. I see Massachusetts. Hello, Massachusetts, Vermont. This is so wonderful, and I'm so very pleased to welcome each and every one of you. So at this point, I'm gonna give it one more minute. All right, at this point, I would like to welcome Ms. Sona Samsami, the US representative of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, who has joined us today. We're very pleased to have you with us, Ms. Samsami, and thank you for accepting our invitation. We really would like to hear from you and the NCRI's analysis on the situation in Iran and the crisis that has engulfed this regime.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for introducing me. I would like to thank the Iranian American communities across the United States for inviting me to speak at this great virtual conference today. I'm speaking today while 40 years of mullah's rule has dismantled the country's medical, health, and welfare foundations to a large extent, leaving our country and society unable to defend against pandemics. Despite Iran being so rich and resourceful with oil, gas, and other natural as well as human resources, unfortunately, some 60 million people live under the poverty line in Iran as I speak to you now. The regime is exploiting the COVID-19 pandemic. It seeks to resort money and resources from abroad and getting sanctions lifted. At the same time, the mullahs are refraining from deploying the government's resources, particularly their financial and technological resources, consolidated in the IRGC's holding and companies, as well as by Khamenei's headquarters worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The religious dictatorship ruling Iran, terrified of popular uprisings, continue to arrest and summon students, youth, former political prisoners, sympathizers of MEK and their families, and sentences political prisoners to lengthy prison terms. It also hangs prisoners to create an atmosphere of fear and terror. At the same time, the regime is stepping up its rogue behavior in the region with the goal of deviating attention from its isolation inside Iran and its utter incompetence and unwillingness to help the people. The regime hopes that by using intimidation and terror, the international community will back down. The regime can survive through 2020. Tehran is also waging an extensive psychological war against the main organized opposition of Iran, the MEK, and the larger coalition of National Council of Resistance of Iran, the NCRI. While the resistance escalates against the Iranian regime, the mullahs spend huge amount of money to demonize the resistance. Tehran has funded its agents, proxies, and its various lobbies to wage hysteric attacks against NCRI and MEK and the leadership of the resistance, and the focus is on Ashraf III in Albania. The Iranian regime, which was unable to destroy the MEK with massacre, torture, assassinations, has now resorted to demonizing campaign. The success of Iranian resistance has only made the regime more hysteric. By no mistake, experience shows that these demonization campaigns by Iranian regime are preludes to terror operations. To reach this objective, the mullahs have resorted to most dirty tactics, such as exploiting the families of Ashraf III residents, or arrest and intimidation of family members in order to break the will of MEK members. All to no avail. The demonization campaign is also meant to create confusion, deter the international community from standing on the side of the organized resistance for change, and at the end of the day, the message is go back to the 40-year-old failed policy of appeasement of the Iranian regime. Ironically, when the Shah was in power, the mullahs collaborated with him and his infamous secret police Savak. Now that the mullahs are in power, the remnants of the Shah regime have sided with the mullahs' notorious IRGC, and publicly they say they intend to recruit the regime's paramilitary Basiji members and IRGC. For their part, the mullahs go to great length to propagate monarchy social media and the fantasy of Shah's remnant aspiring to return Iran to the past. They do this to defy the prospect of free and democratic Iran and future. Fortunately, none of the regime's ploys have worked, nor will they ever work. During the November 2019 uprising, the hollow invincibility of Revolutionary Guards crumbled. People believed in their own power. Their strategy that relied on resistance units and rebellious cities was vindicated. Everyone saw the resistance units offer a breakthrough and are a beacon for uprising and freedom. But at this stage, what should the international community do? In my belief, first, the regime must be pressured to put hundreds of billions of dollars, which are now at the disposal of Khamenei and IRGC, to the service of suffering people of Iran. Secondly, the international pressure on the Iranian regime must step up, as any relief provided to the regime will only empower the IRGC to further suppress the population and escalate the regime's regional destruction. And third, the United States should use its leverage at the United Nations Security Council to facilitate the snapback of all prior United Nations Security Council sanctions as a result of Iranian regime's non-compliance with its own commitments. After all, no relief either now or a few years down the road should be provided to the Iranian regime. Let me conclude by saying that there is a single solution for the situation of coronavirus in Iran, for poverty, for oppression, for terrorism, and for Tehran's global threat. That solution is overthrowing the mullah's religious dictatorship in its entirety by the people of Iran. As Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, the president-elect of National Council of Resistance of Iran, envisioned in her 10-point plan for the future of Iran, we want a free, democratic, non-nuclear republic based on separation of mosque and state, gender equality, and free market economy. The international community should stand on the side of the Iranian people and their resistance. The world would be a safer place with a free Iran. Thank you all, and I wish you the best at these circumstances. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Samsami. Really appreciate your insightful remark. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'm very, very honored to introduce our next speaker, Senator Robert Torricelli, former Senator of New Jersey. Senator Torricelli served in US Congress first in the House and then in the Senate. And over the years, he has been on the forefront and a staunch advocate of a free Iran. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Senator, and we would really like to get your thoughts on a bipartisan view on US policy on Iran, the issue of snapback, and of course, as Ms. Samsami talked about the folks in Ashraf 3 in Albania. I'm gonna turn it over to you. Thank you, Senator, for being with us again.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. To every member of the Iranian American community around the country, and if I could, special words to those brave souls in Ashraf. Most of us carry on this fight with our best wishes, our contributions, and our time. They carry it on 24 hours a day. To all of you in Ashraf, we're thinking of you, and we're so grateful for your efforts. I'm speaking to you from northern Maine on the very edge of the American grid. So if at any point I lose you, my apologies, but I didn't want to miss this occasion. It was while all of us have been dealing with the pandemic and consumed by our own lives, an enormous amount has been happening, obviously, in Iran and around the world. It is almost like a gathering storm. The factors that have conspired to put pressure on this regime and potentially bring it to an almost immediate end. What began with the misrepresentations, the lies about the shooting of the Ukrainian airliner when the regime was caught in its duplicity, continued with the virus, where to this day the regime has not only lied about the impact of the virus, but refused to use resources that are going to the IRGC, the mullahs themselves, to their overseas terrorist campaigns. They should be going to the health of the Iranian people. Those events, combined with a collapse of oil prices and the Iranian oil industry, some due to the international market, some due to a failure to invest in the in Iranian production, and the ostracism of the Iranian regime, has denied the regime of vital resources. They're holding on by having whatever resources they've got go to the IRGC, but they're unable to do basic life supports of the quality of life of the Iranian people or of medical care in order to feed their own security forces. Put all these factors together, they're draining their foreign currency. There's pressure on prices. They've lost control of the streets on occasion. Resistance groups of the MEK have grown all over the country, a few dozen at a time, and now hundreds, as people have been willing to put their lives, their livelihood on the line to support a new and a free Iran. The weight of all of this, getting caught in the lies about the Ukrainian airliner, the lies about the virus, the collapse of oil prices, the failures to invest, the using of vital national resources for corruption and distractions in their own security forces. There's just so much any regime no matter how repressive, no matter how many lives they're willing to take, that they can withstand. That brings us to this moment, because now we're facing a snapback of the sanctions. And I know that the regime is undoubtedly telling the Iranian people, don't worry, we'll wait out Donald Trump. This is just him. It's not just him. This is bipartisan, completely bipartisan. As you saw with the killing of Soleimani, President Trump may have ordered it. It may have come from a Republican administration, but I didn't see much opposition. It was bipartisan. So will the snapback be bipartisan. And so will the continuation of American sanctions until the regime is ended. We're entering a critical phase. The regime has backtracked. If anything else about these mullahs to understand them is, they are cowards. When Soleimani was killed, thankfully, and when President Trump ordered the US Navy to respond and destroy the Iranian Navy if they continue their provocation, they've gone silent. They're back in their holes. They'll come out again, but it's the mark of a coward. But whether they engage in direct combat with the United States or not almost doesn't make any difference. They will not withstand this pressure. What's needed from us? Stay engaged. Stay engaged. The lives that may be lost are the brave students and workers who go to the streets of Iranian cities and protest. Everyone can do something. In Iran, you can go to a protest. You can spray paint on a wall. You can speak with neighbors. You can drop pamphlets. You can do anything. If you're in the oil industry, you can do something, stop resources from going to the IRGC. If you're in the military and you're asked to put down a legitimate protest, refuse. In Iran, it's clear what they can do. For those of us here in America and in the Western world, stay engaged, stay involved, contribute what you can, give your voice when you can, write to relatives what you can, speak with people in Iran, keep the movement alive. I think it is enormously telling that in these desperate moments by the mullahs, when they attack in desperation, they're really only attacking two entities, the United States government and President Trump, that I understand, and Mrs. Rajavi and the MEK. What does that tell you? They're not attacking any other opposition group. They're not attacking any other Iranians. The MEK. That's not by chance. They know that the orchestration, the organization, the sacrifice, and the work that's going to bring down this regime, other than the United States and our Western allies and human rights organizations, is going to come from one place, us. All of us who have dedicated ourselves to the National Council of Resistance and the MEK and Mrs. Rajavi. She alone has the credibility, the resources, will make the sacrifices, as the international network, and the support to do this. At the moment, only Mrs. Rajavi and the MEK is in communication with almost every aspect of the United States government and governments throughout Europe and the Western world. Only the MEK has the people inside Iran, in the resistance groups, who can combine the support and resources in the West with people on the ground in Iran. While all of us have been dealing with the virus, all these forces have been conspiring to add more and more and more and more pressure. I know they're despotic. I know they'll take lives. I know they're desperate. I know they're cruel. We all know what they'll do. I know you better than I. You've lost relatives and friends by the thousands. I don't care how despotic they are. They, like all dictatorships, every one that's ever been in history, they all fall. These guys are not as strong as many. In fact, they're not as strong as most. They're going to fall too. And these events are going to bring us to that moment. To all of you who have stayed engaged and taken your time, everyone in generations to be born in Iran, and all of us who love freedom around the world, we're all so grateful to you. And thank you for having me today. I've been honored to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Torricelli. Well said indeed. And I have to admit, Organization of Iranian Americans is so proud to work in such a bipartisan fashion and have such strong advocates like yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I am very honored to introduce our next speaker, Governor Tom Ridge, America's first Secretary of Homeland Security. Governor Ridge, you have joined us in many congressional events and conferences and have always been on the forefront of advocating a democratic alternative and a resistance and the right US policy. Please share with us your experience with the Iranian resistance.
Well, depending upon what part of the world you're tuned in, it could be good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. In any event, I want to thank the Organization for Iranian American Communities for inviting me to participate in what I consider probably to be an unprecedented meeting of this sort. And my prayers are that you are all well and continue to enjoy good health amidst this global pandemic. So it's a great pleasure to join you. At the outset, I'd like to extend a few special greetings, if you don't mind. I want to thank my friend Bob Torricelli and the Ambassador Blackwell, who's going to join us later. I'm honored to be in their company. As you can see, it is bipartisan, and that's the way it's been for the past 15 years as we've all worked together through various challenges that the MEK and NCRI have confronted over the past decade and a half, that Republicans and Democrats have been involved in strong and collective voice, bipartisan voice for a free and democratic Iran. If you don't mind, I'm going to take the liberty of also saluting the irreplaceable, untiring, indefatigable, and inspirational leadership of Madame Rajavi. And she's got a great group of men and women who support her in that efforts, some overseas, some here in the United States, and it's been a privilege to get to know so many of them. And then finally, some of the most visible heroes and heroines of this battle for a new and free and 21st century Iran are the heroes and heroines, the men and women of Ashraf 3. I'm going to take the liberty of acknowledging a friend of mine who's in their midst, although I've met many of them on a trip to Albania a couple of years ago, Ali Safavi. I wanted to say hello to my dear friend Ali, and also to tell you Ali Reza, who's doing a lot of work back in the United States, is still working 24/7 in the joint cause with me and with so many other friends in this effort. So to all of you, greetings, best wishes, and thanks. I've been on this journey along with Senator Torricelli and so many other Republicans and Democrats for almost 15 years. It's been an incredible journey. It has given me an opportunity to learn more about the extraordinary culture and history of Iran. It's given me the opportunity to learn about the strength and character of the Free Democratic Iran movement, of leadership at all levels, from the community of Iranian American citizens in the United States, to those around the world, to those present at Ashraf. And along the way, there are 3 or 4 ideas or principles or concepts that have been embedded in my mind about this effort, about this vision for a new Iran. The first thought that comes to my mind is the courage of all those involved. You start with the citizens living in Iran, the repression that they've dealt with for decades, the nearly 40,000 martyrs, even more imprisoned, tortured, and released, many of whom to be imprisoned, tortured, and released again. But they continue to march in the cause of freedom. And you think about that. My great friend John McCain, God rest his soul, often talked about people being committed to a cause greater than yourself. And so when you think of the courage and sacrifice of the men and women and young people, teenagers, adolescents in Iran who've given their lives to support this cause, it is very sobering. It's very tragic. It's also very inspirational. They are the patriots, the remarkable group of citizens committed to a cause greater than themselves. The second thought that comes in my mind during the process, during this wonderful journey that I've been on, and it's been a privilege to be part of this group, be on this journey with you, is the whole notion of resilience. Not to be denied, not to be deterred. We shall overcome. And it begins in Ashraf 1, where they built this magnificent venue to support themselves, their artistry, their religion, their cause, each other. Remember, they started from nothing. And when I was first introduced to the men and women of Ashraf 1 and saw for the first time what they had built for themselves in their community, and you said, out of a piece of barren land, they build together a community of artists and engineers and families. It's remarkable. And then they had to leave and abandon Ashraf 1 and amidst lies and broken promises. And through all the trials and tribulations, we moved to Ashraf 2. And they began all over again from nothing and build and renewed their commitment, a visible commitment to each other into a free and independent and democratic Iran. And oh yes, they had to build an Ashraf 3. And every step along the way, that same commitment to supporting each other, their broader community, has frankly also generated continued and sustained support from many of you on this broadcast, many of you involved in the Iranian American communities. So when I think of the courage of the residents, the resilience of those committed to a free and democratic Iran, the best example, the conditions that have been endured for well over a decade by the men and women of Ashraf 3. The next notion, the next idea, the next principle is the nature of the global resistance, the global message. It's personified, has been up until last year, with nearly 100,000 from the diaspora, Iranian diaspora around the world joining in Paris. But over the years in the past decade, more and more leaders and more from more and more countries have understood the passion, the commitment, the resilience, and the courage that Iranian citizens and the community bring to their commitment, to their vision. It's remarkable when you think about it. Remarkable, that diaspora. What's even more remarkable is more the world learns of the commitment, the passion, and the courage of the freedom fighters of Iran, the more and more the world embraces their cause as their own. And that's very, very important. And then finally, I must say, clearly in this 15-year journey, the one word that comes to my mind is freedom. Freedom from a repressive theocracy. Freedom, as Madam Rajavi and previous speakers have outlined, some of that incredible 10-point plan for free, secular democracy in Iran, a 21st century Iran. You know, it reminds me of a gospel song that's been around this country in the United States for, I think, well over 100 years, close to it. It was a song of protest, and then it was a song embraced by those looking to broaden their civil rights in this country. The song was "We Shall Overcome." And there are 5 or 6 stanzas in there, but if I look back and reminded myself, and trust me, I'm going to do you a big favor, I'm not even going to try to sing it. I'll just read, if you don't mind, a couple of the first lines in many of the verses. Remember, it's deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. And then that's how they begins. But it says, we walk hand in hand. Everybody on this telecast walks hand in hand, and those at Ashraf walk with you. Madame Rajavi walks with you. The diaspora that meets in Paris walks with you. Community and political leaders around the world walk with you. We shall be free. That's the vision. We shall be free to go forward. We're not going back to the monarchy. We're going to reject this repressive theocracy. We will be free. We are not afraid. Well, we know that. Sadly, history records maybe as many as 40,000 who weren't afraid to die for a cause bigger than themselves. They will be free, and they're certainly not afraid. And we are not alone. Maybe that's more important to the cause of freedom, to the freedom fighters in Ashraf and Iran, than anything else. Growing worldwide support of your mission. Clearly, Senator Torricelli outlined how strongly bipartisan it is in this country, and is becoming more and more global every single day. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. I was very touched by the words of the daughter and the granddaughter, Hannane and Alia, when they talked about their dad, their father, the freedom fighter. We shall overcome one day. God bless all of you.
Thank you very much, Governor Ridge. I cannot help but to have tears in my eyes after your incredible remarks. And you're absolutely right. We shall overcome. And it really does speak to the resiliency of the movement for a free Iran. We really appreciate your wonderful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, before I move to our next speaker, I'm inspired by the words of Governor, where he was talking to us about political prisoners and the Iranian people. I'm asking my colleagues to give us the view from the West and to the East, because among the Iranian American communities, there are many, many political prisoners who have survived. They have become, as they were victimized by this regime, they are now a survivor, and many of them are now empowered community leader. This is the journey to a free Iran. I want to ask all of my colleagues and all of the participants from the West to the East to hold your hands up in victory as we shall overcome. We shall overcome for a free Iran. I'm seeing Tennessee, I'm seeing Nebraska, I'm seeing New Jersey on the call. Arkansas, thank you so much for joining us. I'm also seeing Ohio, Utah, Oklahoma. Thank you so much for joining us. Excellent. So at this point, that's right, we shall overcome. At this point, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Ambassador Kenneth Blackwell, former US Ambassador to the United Nations on Human Rights Commission. And Ambassador Blackwell has joined us on many events and spoken on the issue of human rights and democracy in Iran. Ambassador Blackwell, just yesterday, the State Department blacklisted those responsible for repression and crackdown in Iran, particularly those who were responsible for the massacre that took 1,500 innocent lives in November of 2019. We also have seen the regime that has continued executions, arrests of students, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Please share with us your thoughts and how you view the situation in Iran.
is a delight to be with you all this day, and it's always a pleasure to be with my colleagues, Senator Torricelli and Governor Ridge. And I don't know how to top what they both contributed. So what I will do is join them in a weaving of the emotions and the thoughts, and then talk to you about what I see happening in the United States. But we are at an inflection point in our struggle to bring about fundamental change in Iran. And it's going to take, as Senator Torricelli said, all of us committing to do what we can, where we are, when we can. And that is so, so very important, because it is so easy to get comfortable with the status quo. But those who thirst for freedom and respect of their human dignity in Iran, they understand that the status quo is not good enough and there must be fundamental change. Those of us in the United States, in the country that is at the point of the spear in bringing about the universal force to affect regime change in Iran, must in fact do what we can at every turn, every day, wherever we are. The federal government, the Trump administration, has committed to an all-of-government approach to really pushing back against a rogue regime that is at the epicenter of international terrorism and disregard for human rights. As was mentioned, just on yesterday, the State Department and the Treasury basically tagged 12 individuals and entities for their violation of human rights and their acts against humanity last year during the uprising in Iran. What we have to do is become an echo chamber to make sure that their voices are amplified in the international community. And there's no bigger megaphone than the government of the United States in the international community. So that means that we must make sure that we show not only the regime, but our government, that there is real meaning to the old Latin saying, e pluribus unum, from the many one. We are, from the youngest ones viewing us today to the most senior of those of us on the call and in this movement. We must show that we are unified and that we are a force that has an expectation that our government will maintain its leadership role in the international community. As one who served on the United Nations Human Rights Commission, I'm very much aware of the fact that many times countries that are on the jury should be in the dock. And that means that what you see on a day in and day out basis are those rogue governments, those gross violators of human rights who happen to be on the Human Rights Council or on the Security Council or any other body that monitors human rights activities. There's a lot of back scratching. There's a lot of protection of one another among those rogue and gross violators. And so we must say to our government that we have to stay engaged and we have to use every resource that we have to affect change and accountability. And so it's a delight to be with you. We must speak to those students who the State Department talked about on May 10th that were arrested and tortured. And for 26 days, you had complete denial on the part of the regime. But because we were consistent, persistent, and right, we in fact, through our government speaking out, have in fact at least gotten the regime to admit that these folks were arrested. This is a clash between forces of light and forces of darkness. And we must understand that even a pin light can pierce the darkness. And so there is no one on this call within our reach that wants to contribute a pin light of light that can't have an impact on the blanket of darkness that presently is represented by the regime in Iran. And so as we pierce the darkness collectively, I in fact embrace the spirit and the commitment of all of you within this network, within the NCRI coalition, and I in fact lock arms with Mrs. Rajavi and the MEK as we lead the way to make sure that international justice is met and that the regime in Iran is outed. So thank you for all that you do. May the spirit of goodwill and the embrace of the dignity of the human spirit be with us all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Blackwell. Indeed, we will pierce the darkness. I am told by my colleagues we have thousands of points of light throughout the United States. Let's take a look across the US again. I want to recognize all of our members, community leaders from California. I want to recognize all of our community leaders from Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, DC area. Thank you so much for making this wonderful virtual conference a reality. This is the 1,000 points of light across the US, as Ambassador Blackwell said, as we pierce in the darkness of the Iranian regime. Thank you so much. Let's hold our hand up for victory. Here we are, that's right. We are in the East Coast at this point. Hello, East Coast. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see so many faces. Every one of you have joined us in every rally and every convention we've had. Thank you for being with us in this virtual conference. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, it is a great pleasure to have a performance by two young OIAC millennials, youth chapter of OIAC, who have joined us on this conference with their performance.
We would like to dedicate this piece to the medical staff across the world, especially the ones in Iran, because they are dealing with COVID-19 and the Iranian regime.
so much. Thank you to Maryam and Milad Hosseini from California and members of OIAC Youth Chapter. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Bishop Dr. Robert Stearns, who have joined us. Dr. Stearns is a founder and executive director of Eagle's Wings, and he's with us here today to share with us his view on U.S. policy and a path forward.
Good day. It is an honor to be with you today. And as a Christian, I greet you in the name of Jesus, whose message is a message of universal love, peace, and justice. And surely we are seeking the peace and justice for the Iranian people. I greet you in the name of Eagle's Wings, our global family who stand with you, and in the name of the Tabernacle, our church in New York, who prays for the justice of your cause and for freedom for the Iranian people. My honor and my thanks to President-elect Maryam Rajavi and the entire National Council of Resistance of Iran for their incredible leadership and your ongoing dedicated work on behalf of the Iranian people and on behalf of freedom everywhere. Tragically, the current Iranian regime continues its repression and gross human rights violations against its own people, preventing the Iranian people from experiencing the freedom and human dignity that is the right of every child of God. The recent COVID-19 crisis has only amplified what we have already known about the leadership of Rouhani and his despotic regime, that they blatantly act against the goodwill of their own people. Just this week, Rouhani falsely boasted that Iran was the third best in the world in the recovery and treatment of coronavirus, when in reality, Iran has experienced an estimated 43,000 deaths from the virus. These statistics have been grossly misrepresented and covered up by the regime to minimize what has actually been taking place within their borders. In addition, as a whole, under the leadership of Rouhani, thousands of lives have been snuffed out through a policy of execution that is the highest in the entire world. And we saw just last week the desecration of the graves of Queen Esther and Mordecai in Iran, which caused so much pain throughout the Jewish and Christian world who revere these saints and leaders. Throughout Rouhani's term, churches have been closed, pastors have been arrested, dissidents have been denied the most basic human rights, including due process of law. The Rouhani regime, this tyrant, he does not represent the Iranian people, and his regime is the main source of instability in that region and supplies millions of dollars to support terrorism in the Middle East and around the world. It is time for him to go. It is time for change. The time for President-elect Maryam Rajavi is now. To echo the proclamation of Dr. Martin Luther King, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Therefore, today, we stand with you in support and in solidarity, and we call upon freedom-loving people everywhere around the world to join with you, to join with President-elect Maryam Rajavi, and to join the Iranian resistance. She has put forth a plan which includes support for a democratic, secular, non-nuclear republic based on gender equality and religious freedom for all. The best course of action for the United States and for other nations around the world is to pursue this policy of firmness and decisiveness against the Iranian regime's repressive and destabilizing policies. And so we pledge to you today, we will hold American elected officials accountable to recognize the right of the Iranian people to have free and democratic process in Iran, and that we will see the removal of this evil regime. To do so holds the promise of literally changing world history. So we stand with you today, the global Christian community, the Eagle's Wings family, the Tabernacle family. We stand with you for a future of the Iranian people that is filled with hope, a hope where our Iranian brothers and sisters and their children, like these beautiful children who just played this beautiful music for all of us, that they can live in their ancient homeland in a free and peaceful country. Thank you for the privilege and honor of standing with you today.
Dr. Stearns, thank you so much for your wonderful remarks. And indeed, it is time for the Iranian regime to go. We really appreciate your continued support, and please send our best greetings to Eagle Wings and your organization. Ladies and gentlemen, as you heard from all of our speakers, the Iranian regime's corruption and funding of terrorism has been a pillar of its strategy. At this point, we have a clip that would give us a much more in-depth view of what this regime has done instead of aiding the Iranian people during the pandemic.
Iran's regime pays IRGC Quds Force proxies 5 times more than Iranian nurses. The mullah's regime claims it is unable to provide medicine and medical facilities to the Iranian people due to U.S. sanctions. Yet over the past 3 months, as coronavirus has spread across Iran and killed many people, the regime continues to pay its proxy militias in Syria and Lebanon in order to continue its regional terrorism and wars. The salary of IRGC militia members in Syria averages about $1,000 a month. According to health ministry officials, the average salary of nurses in Iran is $200 a month. A simple comparison. The $200 monthly salary paid to an Iranian nurse is a fifth of the $1,000 average salary of IRGC mercenaries in Syria. Another comparison. The total salary paid to all nurses in Iran is $30 million a month. The total salary of all IRGC proxy militias in Syria is $70 million a month. Conclusion. The total salary paid to the regime's proxy militias in Syria is more than double the total salary of nurses in Iran. The monthly salary of IRGC proxy militias in Syria is only a fraction of the salary of IRGC mercenaries in different countries. In addition to Syria, the regime pays fixed monthly salaries to its proxy militias in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Afghanistan. The IRGC is currently providing $700 million a year in financial assistance to the Lebanese Hezbollah. Paying salaries to proxy militias is only a portion of the cost of the IRGC's warmongering and terrorism across the globe. Regarding Syria, the mullahs' funding of Bashar al-Assad's dictatorship have cost the regime up to $15 billion a year.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the crimes of the Iranian regime against the people of Iran. With that, let me welcome Reverend Dr. Marcus Miranda, President of New York State Chaplain Task Force. Thank you so much for being with us today. He will be discussing Iran's human rights and uprisings.
Thank you for having me. And once again, I stand here today to let the Iranian people know that we stand with them. that I, like many Christians around the world, will not forget them and their struggle. Madam Rajavi and the National Council of Resistance of Iran have fought and continue to fight a good fight and are committed to continue to fight for a free Iran. The fight is far from over. However, I do feel we're closer to realizing the dreams of millions in Iran. The dream of equality, freedom of the press, and the dream of religious freedom. The blood of those murdered by this current regime cries out for justice, and we must never forget. In the meantime, this tyrannical regime continues to use threats and imprisonment and political execution as a means to silence the moral majority in Iran. But this will not last for much longer. The uprisings have begun, and the uprisings will not stop. How long will this be allowed to go on? How long will Christians and other minority faith groups have to live in fear of arrest and even death? Even now, during this COVID-19 pandemic, tens of thousands have died from infection, while this corrupt regime continues to withhold basic resources that could save thousands of lives. Under this regime, political prisoners continue to be denied fair trials and due process. Under this regime, human rights violations continue to be at an all-time high. And still today, there are no improvements in regards to the rights of women, the press, and ethnic and religious minorities. How long will this be allowed to go on? The great people of Iran are not asking for anything that's out of this world. All they are asking for is basic human rights, the likes afforded to millions around the world. But this regime will not allow this. Instead, they continue to terrorize those seeking these basic human rights. The current regime in Iran continues to express disdain for the United States and Israel and the rest of the free world. This regime has been at war with the international community for much of over 40 years. They have no intention of making things better for the great people of Iran. But there is an answer, and I'm happy to say this. We've met an incredible woman, a true leader, a woman more than capable of leading Iran into a safe and free and prosperous future. This woman is Madam Miriam Rajavi. And let me add that the Iranian people are rallying behind Mrs. Miriam Rajavi. More and more Iranians understand that Mrs. Rajavi is the right person to lead Iran into a bright future, which would bring long-awaited stability to this region. An administration led by Mrs. Rajavi will bring long-awaited freedom to the great people of Iran. And Mrs. Rajavi believes in freedom of religion in Iran. She believes in freedom of the press in Iran. She believes in freedom of speech in Iran. And she believes in women's rights as a top priority. How many more have to die or sit in prison before something is done? The pressure that is being placed on Iran is not enough, and more pressure is absolutely necessary. I said it before and I'll say it again. If the US and other nations truly want to build a peaceful alliance with Iran, they must sit at the table with Madam Miriam Rajavi and the National Councils of Resistance of Iran. If the United States and our international friends truly want stability in the region, they must sit at the table with Madam Miriam Rajavi. It's Madam Rajavi who should be speaking on behalf of a free Iran. The United States and the international community must stand against this current regime and stand with Madam Rajavi. You know, Madam Rajavi's 10-point plan will bring an end to executions in Iran. Madam Rajavi's 10-point plan will give way to a democratic and secular republic. Madam Rajavi's 10-point plan will finally bring about gender equality, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion in Iran. The United States and these other nations must actively pursue a relationship with Madam Rajavi to bring about a free Iran. The voices of our Christian and Muslim brothers and sisters that are currently being held in prisons cry out for justice. Let us never forget them. Thank you, and God bless the people of Iran.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miranda. We really appreciate your remarks, and indeed, it is time to embrace the Iranian resistance movement. Ladies and gentlemen, as I prepare to close our program today, I'm going to ask my colleagues to give us one last view from the West all the way to the East, and I'm about to read a joint resolution that was adopted by all of the Iranian American communities who took part in today's virtual conference. Let me reiterate their message that is coming from the Iranian American community in this conference today. Number one, change in Iran is inevitable, and the Iranian American communities stand in full solidarity with the people of Iran, the longest suffering victims of Mullah's regime. We fully support their calls for change of the regime by Iranian people, as evident in 2018, 2019, and 2020 uprisings. Number two, the ruling mullahs who have engaged in domestic repression, terrorism, and nuclear expansion have attempted to exploit the COVID-19 pandemic. Any attempt to accommodate the mullahs' political agenda in the context of global pandemic is an affront to the pro-democracy movement in Iran. Number three, US policymakers must heed the message of the Iranian people who say down with the dictators and isolate the regime of Khamenei, Rouhani, and Zarif. Number four, the future of Iran belongs to those who are willing to pay the price for a free Iran, the resistance units. It is time for the world community to stand on the side of the Iranian people, recognize their right to overthrow this regime, and support the 10-point plan presented by Mrs. Mariam Rajabi for a future Iran. Number five, the Iranian regime's human rights dossier must be referred to the UN Security Council for crimes against humanity, and the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and other officials should be held accountable. Number six, Iranian Americans believe that the maximum pressure policy is the right approach and should be maintained. We call on the United States to ensure UN arms embargo on this regime is never lifted. And number seven, Tehran is already in serious violation of UN Security Council, Resolution 2231. And thus, it is now time for the US to activate the snapback at the UN and ensure that all 6 prior UN Security Council resolutions are reenacted and all of the prior sanctions are reinforced on this regime. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude our program. I want to congratulate all of my colleagues, all of the communities who made this event possible today. Thank you again for holding such a wonderful and successful event. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Absolutely.
احساس رهایی با دستبان نمیتونی بزنی تا گفتم مرگ بر تو زندگی آغاز شد منتشر آره من شورشیم من شورشیم زاده فقرم توی تهرون بور خوابم احواز بی نفس مونده توی تب و تابم تو فکر سختی تو سرکن زهابم بلوچم که توی کپر زیر موج شم در التهابم زاید درود تشنه آبم ولی تو با گوله دادی جوابم من شورشیم من شورشیم من شورشیم اگه با تو نجنگم قطعا اینجا میمیرم اگه با تو نجنگم شاید ولی حقم رو بیشک میگیرم من شورشیم این کار تو هم سرچشمه روشن تقصیرم من روح تعاجب بی‌وقفه حتمیت لحظه تغییرم من تاکسی رو که بنزینشو بردی اون مال باخته که دار نداشت خوردی اون پول برای که دوستش کشتی اون دختر آبی که حقشو مشتی فسیل بخشی ازش گرفتن و پرشو چیدن و یهو چریدن آره ببین منو آره من شورشیم هر اسمم که اسمشو نداد بدون دختری که زیر شکنجه پر زد و رنج آزادی رو بار شده حالا داشت میترسی از تکرار صداش آره من شورشیم همه راه ها رو رفتم حریق خونبار 67م خروش و زکه مادریم که بچه‌شو توی باغچه خونه خاک کرد اینا رو که نمیشه از تاریخ پاک کرد اینا رو که نمیشه از تاریخ پاک کرد من شورشیم اگه با تو نجنگم قطعا اینجا میمیرم اگه با تو نجنگم شاید ولی حقم رو بیشک میگیرم من شورشیم این کار تو هم سرچشمه روشن تقصیرم من روح تعاجب بی‌وقفه حتمیت لحظه تغییرم من شورشیم اگه با تو نجنگم قطعا اینجا میمیرم اگه با تو بجنگم شاید ولی حقم رو بیشک میگیرم من شورشیم این کار تو هم سرچشمه روشن تأثیرم من روح تهاجم بی‌وقفه حتمیت لحظه تغییرم